Hey, this is the Binge. No distractions, just a conversation that probably started as a random thought and somehow turned into a full-blown fixation. You know that feeling when someone grabs your attention and it won't let go? That's what this is. Every episode is a deep dive into whatever's been living rent-free in my mind. Interesting, absurd, maybe a little dark, definitely worth your time. So, settle in. We're about to get into some shit.
It's the Binge Podcast where everything's a blast. It's the Binge Podcast. Come join us fast.
They built the lie out of clean sentences and government stationery, stamped it with authority, and fed it to the public like vitamins. That's how it always starts. Polite, bureaucratic, almost boring. Then the thing mutates. It grows teeth. It learns how to hide. Call it MK Ultra, a name that sounds like it belongs on a box of discount tech from a dying electronics store. But it was real, and it was ugly, and it was carried out by the very polished hands of the Central Intelligence Agency during the nervous breakdown we like to romanticize as the Cold War. This was an era where fear wasn't just ambient, it was currency. The Soviets might have the bomb, the edge, the upper hand. And somewhere in that panic, a question bubbled up from the darker corners of the intelligence world. What if the mind itself could be cracked open like a safe? Not persuaded, not influenced, broken, and rebuilt. That's not science fiction. That's policy. The architects of MK Ultra weren't cartoon villains. That would be too easy. They were educated men, some of them brilliant, who convinced themselves that morality was a luxury item. Nice to have in peacetime, but expendable when the stakes felt apocalyptic. They spoke in clinical language, the kind that scrubs the blood off an idea before it's even tested. Behavior modification, interrogation resistance, cognitive restructuring. Hell of a way to say, let's see what happens when we push a human being past the point of psychological no return. They started small, if you can call it that. Doses of LSD administered in controlled settings. Volunteers. Sometimes. But consent in these contexts is a slippery, almost meaningless word. When authority is involved, when money or coercion or institutional pressure enters the room, yes doesn't always mean yes. Sometimes it means, I didn't feel like I could say no. And then they stopped asking altogether. People were dosed without warning. At parties, in offices, in hotels, a drink here, a cigarette there, and suddenly reality starts to melt at the edges. Walls breathe. Time stretches like warm tar. Panic sets in, primal and absolute. And somewhere nearby, someone is taking notes. One of the more grotesque sub-projects, because apparently there was a menu of these things, involved safe houses in places like San Francisco and New York. The agency rented apartments, dressed them up like low-rent fantasies, and hired sex workers to bring in clients. It was a honey trap soaked in acid. The men who walked in thought they were chasing a cheap thrill. What they got instead was a chemically induced nightmare, observed through one-way glass by men with clipboards and a mandate to learn something useful. Useful for what? Interrogation? Blackmail? Control? Even they didn't seem entirely sure. That's the thing about this whole rotten enterprise. They had the frantic, scattershot energy of people throwing darts in the dark, hoping one would land on a solution to a problem they barely understood. And the subjects, the subjects. Prisoners who couldn't refuse. Psychiatric patients who were already hanging on by a thread. Ordinary citizens who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, trusting the wrong institution. They weren't seen as people. They were variables, data points, disposable. Some were subjected to repeated dosing over days or weeks, their sense of self eroded layer by layer. Others endured electroshock therapy cranked far beyond therapeutic levels, combined with drugs to disorient and destabilize. There were attempts at psychic driving, where patients were forced to listen to recorded messages on loop for hours, days, sometimes longer, while under heavy sedation. The goal was to wipe the slate clean and write something new. Imagine that. Your personality, your memories, your identity reduced to static, then overwritten like a corrupted tape. It didn't work, not in any clean, controllable way. The human mind isn't a machine you can reprogram with a few chemicals and a tape recorder. It's messier than that, more fragile, more stubborn. What they got instead were broken people, fractured, paranoid, sometimes permanently damaged. There's a name that surfaces in the wreckage: Frank Olson, a CIA scientist who, depending on which version of the story you believe, was dosed with LSD without his knowledge at a retreat. Days later, he fell, or jumped, from a hotel window in New York. The official story shifted over time, as these things tend to do, when the truth is inconvenient. Accident, suicide, something else. His family spent decades trying to pry the facts out of a system designed to bury them. That's another thread in this tapestry of rot. When things went wrong, and they did, spectacularly, the response wasn't accountability, it was containment, silence, denial. The machine protecting itself. By the time the 1970s rolled around, the cultural tide had shifted. The same decade that gave us the Watergate scandal also cracked open a few of the intelligence community's darkest closets. Investigations, like the Church Committee, began dragging secrets into the light, piece by ugly piece. That's when the public got a taste, just a taste, of MK Ultra. Documents surfaced, testimonies were given, and right on cue in 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of most MK Ultra files. Not a review, not a careful archiving for history, just a bonfire of evidence. If you ever wanted a clearer signal that something was deeply, profoundly wrong, that's it. You don't burn records of things you're proud of. What survived was enough to be damning, but incomplete enough to be maddening. We know there were over 100 sub-projects. We know universities, hospitals, and private institutions were involved, sometimes knowingly, sometimes as unwitting fronts. We know money flowed through cutouts and shell organizations to keep the whole thing comfortably deniable. And we know the true scope of it will probably never be fully understood. But here's the dirty secret no one likes to say out loud. Programs like MK Ultra don't just happen because a few bad actors go rogue. They happen because a system, layered, complex, and insulated, allows them to happen. Because oversight fails, or is bypassed, or is willfully ignored. Because fear makes people sign off on things they'd otherwise reject. It's easy in hindsight to paint it all as madness, to say, well, that was a different time. But that's a comforting lie. The ingredients are always there: fear, power, secrecy, and the seductive idea that the ends might justify the means if the stakes are high enough. That's how you get responsible men in quiet offices deciding that dosing strangers with psychedelics is a reasonable line of inquiry. That's how you get institutions convincing themselves that breaking a few minds is an acceptable price for national security. And that's how you end up with the paper trail so damning it has to be burned. The real horror of MK Ultra isn't really what was done, it's how easily it was justified while it was happening. How it was folded into the machinery of government, normalized, sanitized, given a code name and a budget and a sense of purpose. Because once you accept that kind of logic, once you let that door crack open even a little, there's no clean way to close it again. It lingers. Not as a conspiracy theory or a late-night ghost story, but as a precedent. A reminder that under the right pressure, with the right cocktail of fear and ambition, even the most powerful institutions can drift into something unrecognizable, something cold, something clinical, something that looks at a human being and sees not a life, but an opportunity. And if that doesn't sit right with you, if it doesn't itch somewhere deep in your brain, then you're either not paying attention or you've already made peace with the idea that some lines were meant to be crossed. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe.
Tune in right now. Got stories to tell, from the small to the grand, all under one spell. We talk about this, we laugh about that, from the strange to the bliss. Get ready to chat. It's the Binge Podcast, where everything's a blast. It's the Binge Podcast, come join us fast. Right now, got stories to tell, from the small to the grand, all under one spell. We talk about this, we laugh about that, from the strange to the bliss. Get ready to chat. It's the Binge Podcast, where everything's a blast. It's the Binge Podcast, come join us fast. Where everything's a blast. It's the Binge Podcast, come join us fast. Tune in right now. Stories to tell, from the small to the grand, all under one spell. We talk about this, we laugh about that, from the strange to the bliss. Get ready to chat. It's the Binge Podcast, where everything's a blast. It's the Binge Podcast, come join us fast.